Hello, welcome to the February 27th Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de or simply ask your questions in the live chat field. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. That information is helpful. Which version number, so if you're running 11, 12, or 13, or if you're running Mac or PC. When asking questions, realize that we may not have an immediate response to the question, but we will try to answer the questions chronologically as they come in. So if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics, you could go to you could go to cubaseindex.com. So once again, go to cubaseindex.com and you could search for over 31,000 different you can search for over 31,000 different topics that have been created there. And we want to give special thanks to Jan at Stockholm for creating that website. We also give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude for their work as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do this kind of out of the goodness of their hearts to make it a better community. So we'll give special thanks to them. And also give a kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful service for the Steinberg community. So make sure you check that out. Today, it is the last live stream of the month, which means we will be doing our Zoom social meetup starting in about 2 hours from now. I posted the link on the comments field. I also shared it with a couple people via email. So it's just a wonderful way to meet people who attend the live streams. So you could check. So it's always wonderful to meet different people from throughout the world that you may see on the live stream. So we hope to see you there. And I'll try to post a link about every 30 minutes just to so it can be found. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I work primarily focusing on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from the United States, from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. With that, since we have only 2 hours, we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. Ed Rugman asks, "Hi Greg, I pinged you with an email question about the tempo track editor working on a project tonight. Wonder if you might be able to include a quick look at it on tonight's Club Cubase." All right, so question was, let me just pull it up. Question is, in previous versions, I've been able to have the tempo track as a list on a separate monitor. My main 4K screen is too far away to see the tempos in the browser, and it seems there is no option to list tempos in the tempo track editor anymore in Cubase 13. Additionally, they have removed the project browser that was perfect for this to be used on a closer monitor and edit the tempos manually for fine detail. Is there a workaround, a hidden way to do it, or could I just put in a request to have this re-enabled, a floating window, the tempo events that are editable? It's fouled up my workflow a bit for fine editing and especially for finding duplicate tempo data. All right, so we can see the tempo. Once we have tempo events here, we can see the tempo indicators right here. But if you want it on a separate screen, if you open the tempo editor, and we can do that by hitting Control or Command plus the letter T, and so this will be on a separate window. And if if you don't see kind of the list, make sure that if you wanted to see the values that are here, and it may default to the info line being disabled. So, but as soon as we come right over here and we navigate to our different tempo events just using the left and right arrow keys that we could navigate just like this and see directly here the numeric values as well as the graphic representation. So unfortunately, the project browser from Cubase 12 is one of the features that had kind of evolved out in Cubase 13, so it's no longer available, but let me know, Ed, if that would work for you. All right, let's go to next question. Carlo R390 asks, "Hi Greg, my mix is too quiet, and when I move the faders up, I clip the master fader. How to make a loud mix without clipping?" All right, so it could really depend on the gain structure of your mix, but what I would do if I was starting a project is, just as a rule of thumb, if we come over, let's get to this project here, we'll activate it. So when we look at our mix here, so as we do this, a lot of times one mistake I think that people make is using their master fader as their monitor volume instead of the control room. So when I come here, let's say if I have my project, I could use my control room as the monitoring level, and then I could come, and if I use my master fader for the control room level, I would just at this point, when we export the mix, it's going to attenuate it down by minus 15, 16 dB. So ideally, you'd want to build your mix where, as much as you can, try to keep your master fader close to 0 and then raise the faders up to match. Now, if you've gotten into a position where you've done your mix and you want to raise or lower all of these particular channels and have this to accommodate a louder master fader, what we could do is select all the channels. So I'll just hold down my shift key, select the first and the last channel. You could excuse me, enable Q-Link, and then you could just bring all the faders down. So try to start off and try not to move your master fader so much, and then bring in the tracks, and that'll probably ensure you better gain structure for your mix. All right, Peter Wild is sending greetings from Switzerland. Thanks for joining us. And his question is there a way to smooth or interpolate automation points? All right, so let's say we have some automation going on here. I'll activate this project. All right, so say I have lots of little automation points here. So, when if you're drawing in automation, one of the things you could do is, if you go to your automation panel, we could actually, if you go to settings, we could do a resolution level. So if we want to, like as we're writing in automation, that we could, reduce the amount of points. But one of the things that we could also do, so if you didn't want it to write every single value, but kind of interpolate, like as the automation is being written, go to the automation panel, which is accessed by hitting F6, go to the settings, and we could just come right over here and set the reduction level. If you wanted to, take automation here, we could also just kind of, if we wanted to smooth and, kind of compress or expand our automation or raise and lower, but that's going to do it to the existing automation points. But I think as you write the automation, if you go to the automation panel again, I believe it's settings, it'll default to 50%. So as you write automation in, that will kind of interpolate between different automation points. Wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, we have Asfrita from North Carolina. Greg, is there a way to look up user presets on Cubase Frequency EQ plugin. I find it difficult to locate my presets among all the Cubase presets. Okay, so let's say if you want to immediately find your particular presets for plugins, so I will come over here. Let's go to Inserts, go to EQ to Frequency. I'll just come over here. We'll save this as a preset. Okay, so should be able to, once we come over here, so I know a lot of people kind of old school will just put like their initials, and then you could search. So within the plugin, if you wanted to isolate the particular presets, if we come over here to Media Bay, and we'll just go home, we'll say user presets for VSTFX presets. And we can see our February 27th. And now as I drop this in a particular track, we could open up the frequency EQ with that plugin instantiated automatically. So you could quickly navigate to all of your, if you're in Media Bay, you could just go to user presets and you'll see VSTFX presets, and then you could see them all here, and you could search for, I just wanted to find dynamics, and so at this point you could just search for, let's say I'm looking for EQ plugins for frequency, then I could navigate directly to all of my presets, my user presets directly for frequency, just that easily. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, great to see Stefan from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Patrick on, and he asks, is there a command to remove all audio region description so that all you see is the file name instead? Okay, so let's say when I come here, we have a description. I'll just type in some nonsensical so we could separate it. Okay, so when we look at this, I think it might be in the preference. Let's take a look, see if it's in the preferences. Think that there is a way of doing it. Let's just so if you come over here, you can see show event names. So right now you could see that, and try ticking that off and let me know if that works for you, Patrick. And then you won't see the names. So preferences, event display, show event names. All right, so we have NJ Budaman from Nashville checking in. Thanks for joining us. We see Jason Sykes from South Shields, England. All right, and great to see Martin from Germany. And we have the artist known as Love from New York, if memory serves correctly. He wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, we have John Costigan. We see him checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Spa Dogs from Canada. All right, so we see from You Reckon That Grew, Tree of Tree of Life. Hi, Greg. Can you share tricks for creating organic hats or shakers, i.e. the length and velocity, or changing randomly across the entire arrangement? Hope I'm clear in my question. Thanks. All right, so one of the things that I would do if I was doing just, I think one of the things that a lot of people miss on like hi-hats and shakers is just a velocity variation. So let me open up a quick project. We just have a drum event. Okay. So let's say if I wanted to do something, we'll just make a quick generic drum pattern, and we'll add some hi-hats and show you how to make them more interesting. Okay, so let's say we have this. All right, so I'm just going to put in a quick generic drum pattern here. All right, so let's say I want all right, and now I just want to put in some hi-hats. So a lot of people, when they kind of program drums, may just put in like kind of straight velocity. But if I just vary the velocity, let's say every other velocity hit, it's kind of, so the feel is exactly the same. As opposed to it sounding very mechanical, just putting in like just varying the velocity of just those hi-hats versus, so if we have that versus so if you do a lot of velocity variations like that, that can make a big, huge difference in kind of making shakers feel more realistic and more natural and kind of adding interesting elements to your particular project. So really explore some of the velocity variations. Great to see Benny from Sweden and Dallas LaRue. And we have Robbie checking in from Croatia. Thanks for joining. Great to see Michael Pierce on. Hope that you can make it to the Zoom social meetup today. He wants everyone to smack the like button. All right, Mircea Brinzan asks, hi Greg, I have a problem with my Korg PA. I have a text file and the MIDI device manager is expecting an XML file. How do I convert it to use a text file instead of XML? Thank you. So a text file is going to be used for the patch scripts, and we can think of the XML file is going to be used for the MIDI remote. So if you're going to be using it as a MIDI remote, at this point, this is where the XML file would be working. Probably the Korg PA. I'm not sure exactly which Korg unit it is, but if we come over to your studio setup, from the studio menu, we go to let me go to my MIDI device manager rather. So just come here. So we will say MIDI device manager. And when we go to install a device here, these are all text files. So we could define a new one. There's also, you could copy these into the scripts preset folder. And what this would allow me to do is, let's say, okay, like I'll just load up my Korg 05 RW, which I still have one of, and let's say it's connected here. When I go to add a MIDI track, what the text file allows you to do is to see the particular name. So we'll say, okay, we come here. I'm going to route this output to my Korg 05 RW, and then we could see all the patch names in the device. So the text file is for patch name scripts, and the XML is for MIDI remote. Like here's my Korg Nano control. So I could use that for my Nano control. So if it's a MIDI remote that you're using it for, you can click on the settings wheel and then go to scripts and choose to import script. But generally text files are for the preset, like the patch scripts, and XML are for the particular MIDI remote configurations. All right, Robbie asks a question, Greg, please tell us how to create keyboard shortcuts for zones, regions within the project. So if you want to, navigate to, let's say if I'm here in my project and I want to navigate to different areas, one of the things you could do is just have markers. So as we come over here, we could create marker tracks. So if we wanted to go to like the second verse, the third chorus, the bridge, the guitar solo, so we could have position markers, or we could have cycle markers. So if we want to just even kind of take this range, we could add a cycle marker, and now we could use keyboard shortcuts. I think it's to navigate to the various markers. So once you have kind of the markers in play, you could use the keyboard shortcuts. So we'll just say you could find them. Let's say you go your key commands, and then you could go to marker, and you could even just come over here. Let's say, so if you hit like shift, and I think it's the keys on the computer keyboard, that we could just come over here and navigate to. So, or I'm hitting shift +4 to go to the fourth marker, shift +5, and this is the numbers on the QWERTY keyboard. And then you could navigate to markers or hit Alt N, sorry, not Control N, but you could also navigate to Alt N or Alt B to just navigate between different markers to go forward and backward. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right, great to see Daniela Tocan from Germany on. All right, Jonathan Lang asks, won't pulling all faders like that mess with post-fader sends? So if that's a concern, if you have the sends already set up, what you could do is simply take all of those particular tracks. I'll navigate to that project quickly. So if you already had the sends built up, what you could do is select all of the tracks, route these to a VCA fader, and now you could adjust the VCA fader, and that will keep the proportionality of your sends. All right, so we see Peter Wild says, thank you, Greg. Didn't think of the automation panel. So, all right, great to see Soren from Sweden. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Robbie asks, also, Greg, is it possible to create my own loops and samples folder in media so that it has a custom picture? So these, we can make, you can create a folder and store it in your favorites, but when we have these folders here where we see kind of the pretty icons, this is kind of entailing that these are Steinberg, that they are VST sound files that have all of the metadata. So, so if you wanted to sign up to, I think you could do an AP, like maybe an SDK to become a content developer with that, and then those could show up, or you could just simply go to your file browser where you have those particular files that you want, come over here, right click and add favorites. And then just directly from here, you don't get the pretty icons, but you can navigate to your favorites folder very easily. But the ones that you see the icons for, there's a lot of metadata for tempo, root key, characteristics, styles, substyles, genres, etc. All right, NJ Budaman asks, hi, I've switched from Cubase 12 Pro to Cubase 13 Pro PC. I'm having trouble getting my head around how to mix down, master, and completely finish projects. Are there any simple tutorials to start? So, there's lots of ways to do it. So let's say we have this project here. And I'll just revert it to where it was. And so if I wanted to mix down this project, so it's like, okay, kind of happy with the levels. So what I could do is I could control or command plus the letter A, and I'm going to hit the letter P, and this will set the left and right locators. And we can think of this as the start and the end of our exported range. We would now go to your file menu to export audio mix down. And at this point, we could choose your output channels. So if I want to do just a single stereo mix, I could do that. We could give it a name. And after export, we could just have it create a file. We could launch it into programs like Wavelab, or I could actually create an audio track, which is often what I do. We'll export this file. It's going to be added as an audio track at the bottom of the project. And now that we look at it, here is our file. If you needed to do more processing on this particular file, you could run it through additional plugins if needed. There's many different definitions of mastering, but if I wanted to come here and run it through, let's say the multi-band compressor, so if I needed to do additional processing, I could do that. And if I wanted to apply that to the file, there's a number of different ways of doing it. One is I could just come right over here, say render in place, and we'll have it include the channel settings, which would be the inserts and EQs. And we could render this, and now we could have kind of our mastered file right in line with it as well. So, but if you need to do that, some people will choose to do the processing on the master fader, but you could do that as well. You will kind of get the same results. But, select all the files, hit the letter P to set the left and right locators, go to your file menu to export audio mix down. Okay, Robbie asks, is it possible to separate the locator selection from the range selection? So I select only the events with the range selection, but the locators don't move, so it's a preference. So we go over here to your preferences, and I believe it's under editing. Let's see if it's cycle follows range selection. So if that is disabled, now when I grab my range selection tool, we'll see that the left and right locators aren't affected. With that preference enabled, again, cycle follows range selection. Now you'll notice that the locators here will change to match. And once that's disabled, then they're independent of each other. So let me know if that helps. All right, we have a question. Hi, can you show me how to do this? I have a loop with a tempo of 140 BPM. I imported into Cubase. How do I tell Cubase that the loop has a tempo of 140 BPM so it understands and changes the tempo of the loop along with the tempo of the project? So if the loop already has the metadata in it, you don't have to do really much of anything. You just enable musical mode. So let's say I have a loop. Let's go find a couple drum loops here. All right, so I'm going to drag this drum loop in. So as we have this drum loop, a lot of times you may notice that the loop itself may have the tempo information in the audio file. The loop may also have metadata that sets the tempo. So we could look at the tempo information of the file. So once we select our file here, let's come and we could go to our pool window. We could look at the audio files, and as we scroll over, we could see if there's tempo information that's embedded as metadata in the file. If there isn't, you could enter in the tempo value there, and there's a mode here called musical mode. So if I play this now and I have musical mode disabled, we hear after time that it gets out of time. The more we play, the more out of time it gets. So if I want this file where we have the tempo metadata information, whether we entered it or whether it's just part of the program, or it's part of the file itself, once we enable musical mode, so now I could take other files that are different tempos, and as I drop these in, if it's set to musical mode, they will automatically follow. But if both events here are not set to musical mode, they could both not follow. But all you have to do, if the tempo information is in there, just come right here and just enable musical mode, and then that will automatically follow the tempo, the project tempo in Cubase for you. Okay, Andre asks, using Cubase 13 Pro, audio tracks sometimes do not overlap when recording. Audio disappears in lanes. I'm using Keep History in audio recording. Am I missing something, or has Steinberg changed lanes? So it seems to me it works the same, and I got your email about this as well. So we just jump to a different project here, where I have a file kind of set up. Okay, so here I have an audio file where we have different lanes that appear. Okay, so now there's two different areas where we could put in, our audio. So where we could enable delete overlap. So it really sounds like it's a delete overlaps setting. So if I come, let's say I do my So let's say I have this set up. All right. And you say sometimes the tracks do not overlap in recording. Audio disappears in lanes. All right. So as soon as we have that recording, so let's say if I have these two files and, we move them around, we could, one, you could check to see if your different takes are there, but, make sure that you have, if you go to the audio to advanced, there's a delete overlaps function that could be set, but you could also do it globally in the preferences. So a lot of people miss this one, that if you go to editing, that there's a delete overlaps preference there. So as soon as I would, move an audio file on top, that those events can be, I'll just take some new audio files, some new loops in. So now when I have these two events that are overlapping, and I'm not going to take it out of shuffle mode here, sorry. That will overlap because of the preference. If I drag this over, that the front of that is still there. The audio can still be revealed on the project window, but let me know if and you said you didn't have delete overlaps active, if you have it in the advanced area, or if it's, make sure it's also deactivated in the preferences. So if you could let me know that, Andre. And thanks for being a loyal Cubase user since Atari Falcon. I still have my Falcon, so. All right, Gaming Octopus asks, hi Greg, so I took some MIDI that has notes not locked to grid. I want the exact feel and placement of MIDI notes so that I can save groove and replay exact feel of the MIDI, the exact placement. So let's come over. I'll just add a quick instrument track here. Here, sorry, let me just, so let's say I want to take, all right, so say, okay, so I'm going to do just quick recording here. All right, so if I want that particular feel, we didn't really record it to a click. All I would have to do is if we open up your Quantize panel, and we could also do that from your edit menu to Quantize. And all you have to do is drag this event over, that MIDI event over, and then that will automatically save as a preset. So we could have a Groove Quantize preset So you could use that for other elements. So any part that you just played in, drag it over, and then you could have that Groove Quantize preset saved that you could access for others. All right, we have Billionaire Mindset, Let's Grow Together, saying hello to everyone. Daja asks, Cubase 13 Pro, how do you assign a key to a macro you create in the project logical editor? So if you go to your key commands, under your edit menu, you'll see a category for, I'll just hide my macros here. So you'll see process project logical editor. So as soon as you make a preset or any of the presets that are available here, we can just select, enter in the key command that you want for this particular function, and then hit enter, and that key command will be assigned to that project logical editor preset. All right, I'm going to paste the Zoom meetup starting about an hour and 20 minutes. Here's the link one more time. Please feel free to share it in the Discord if you want. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so Influential Gaming asks, one of the best things about Cubase is it hasn't been made a mistake of becoming a subscription model. Everyone I know dropped those companies in any form of editing or design, including Adobe. So, all right, Wonderful C. Taylor from Music for World Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. All right, Spa Dogs asks, Cubase 13, Mac M1 Ultra, exporting, I get external plugin use audio mixdown must be done in real time. Have to turn them on and off again to proceed. How do I get Cubase to remember that they are off? So there's a good chance that it's not off and it's still on. What I would do is maybe choose to, in this case, let's say I have Retrolog here. So this has MIDI on it. Our Hallian Sonic track where we just did our little tempo, that has MIDI on it here. And let's say I have this assigned, my K12, it's in my template. It's open. There's no data on it. So, but since this is an external instrument, we could add instrument. We'll see under the external category that once you have that in your template or project, it would force you to do real-time export. So if there's no data, what I would do is go to the project logical editor, and you can make a preset that does this. I think I have one that's already made. Okay, yeah, so I opened it up earlier just to make sure I had it. So I chose to select, and we'll say container type is equal to track, and the media type is equal to MIDI, and the property is set to is empty. So there's no parts on this. So the instrument is still on, but you know what we want to do is to disable that, because once an instrument track is disabled, then we won't get the real-time export. So we're going to select tracks that are empty, and this goes for virtual instruments or external instruments. And in the post process, we want to choose under the audio category, you'll see disable/enable track. So at this point, when we would go to do an audio export on this project, it would do real time because there is a external virtual instrument, and being it's an external instrument or an external processing gear, it's going to require real time. So now that there's nothing on this track, I could just say run this project logical editor preset, and all the tracks that are empty including my groove agent percussion and my external instruments. If they're not being used, they're disabled, then we could export in real-time manner. So you could try a Project Logical Editor preset, but just because there's nothing there, it's still on and it's doing all the delay calculations still. So give that, and once again, that Project Logical Editor preset. We want to container type is equal to track, media type is equal to MIDI. Property is set to is empty, so it's going to select all of your empty MIDI tracks, and then as the post process, disable/enable the track. All right, we see music for World Peace Records. Taylor asks, why is offline process called offline when it's done inside of Cubase? Because it's done not in real time, and the processing is being written to the file offline, so not necessarily as a real-time process. So that's why it's considered kind of offline process, because it's actually taking that particular file, processing it, and it's not doing it in real time. So Music for World Peace Records asks, is there a way to see the dB peak level in a waveform in the project window? So I don't think that there's a way to immediately. I think Wavelab has some functions where it could take you to the loudest spot. If you wanted to know what the value is, we could select it and go to audio statistics. So I'll just have that. We'll come here to the audio statistics, and then you could see the values of it. If you want it to, so we can see what your peak level is here, minus 3.06. If you want it to also, let's go to the event display. There's some preferences, which could also, like, kind of more for low level amplitude, but let's come over to so sometimes there's a background color modulation, and sometimes this could be useful for kind of low level amplitude material. So you can see that as you can see kind of the amplitudes here get darker depending upon the amplitude of the wave file. So if I want, so with that preference, so if I take this and we have kind of low level amplitude on this section, we could see where this kind of stands out darker, that those are the areas that you could kind of visually see. But I don't think that there's a way to say take me to like the peak in Cubase, but I think it is available in Wavelab. All right, Taylor also asks, are the 3 zoom modes in the lower zone available in in the project window? So I think it's going to be different because of kind of what we're looking at here, because we could see, if we want to, it's you could kind of get the same results. So as soon as we are here, we could choose to say, with how we're, I'll just do this on a editor. So, here we could choose to do global zoom, which will kind of match. We could do clip-based zoom, where we see only, so we could auto zoom to the event. We could also clip zoom. But if we wanted to do something similar, so it's different, but I think you get the same results. So if you go to your edit to zoom, you could say zoom full, and you could do that for the projects. And I think if once we come over here to your zoom menu, We could, zoom to selection. So this could kind of get you similar results. So, but it just kind of allows you to see everything when you're working in the sample editor as well. But you could get many of the same exact functionality just by going to the functions that you could access in the zoom menu here. So zoom to selection, zoom in, zoom full. So kind of very similar concepts. Great to see 808 King on. Glad you can make it. Daphone. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. Just saying hi. Music for World Peace Records ask how to drag a MIDI pattern into chord pads in Cubase 12. So in 13, we'll show you what you could do. I could just take this particular pattern and drag it in. And I think it's similar in 12, but it's slightly different because that was an area that was revamped interface-wise. So let's take a look at 12. Just get this open real quick. Haven't opened this in a while. Okay, so now we'll be back in 12. Let's get to the chord pads. So I'm just going to drag over some MIDI content here. All right, so we can go, let's say to all right, so now we would see the player modes. We would choose pattern. And then I think that we could just drop the MIDI event right there. And that's how you could get it in. So once again, make sure that you click on the chord pads, click on the edit function, and you want to go to pattern. And as you kind of drop an event from your project window, you could just drop it right there, and that will do the trick. Great to see you back on, Taylor. Hope you're well. Daniel Tokan asks, today is a Zoom meeting, so yes, we'll start in about an hour and 7 minutes. Look forward to seeing new faces and meeting new people. All right, so we see just from Rentakostas Zook Lefts. Hello all, I have Cubase 12 and I have a problem with the version of Addictive Drums. So, let me know, which I don't have a license of Addictive Drums in this computer, but, make sure that you have the 64-bit version installed. So, or if you could let us know what the issue is, we could maybe try to help you. All right, Jason Sykes asks, question, the Q-Link function in the mixer, is there a way to use this function once automation of volumes is active, or in other words, reduce all automated volumes by 25%, keeping all moves relative? All right, so we'll just set up kind of 2 tracks here. So there's a couple different approaches for this. Okay, so let's say we have our automation here. So, if you want to place both tracks, so let's say we could come over here to an automation mode called trim. So we go to the automation, and let's say in our mix console, I want to have these in Q-Link. So it's not exactly by 25%, but now if I take these channels here, we put them in Q-Link, I could take the existing automation, bring them both down. Let's say if I write the automation here, that we could take the automation, the existing automation, and we could trim the automation on both tracks. So what this has done is, as I've kind of moved the fader, if we look at, we can see kind of the two lines of automation here, and this is what we trimmed versus what we did directly there. We could now come over here and say freeze all trim automation in a project, and now at that point we could take it out of trim mode and we could have the levels reduced in the automation. Another method could be to just use the project logical editor. So if I wanted to take the project logical editor, we could say we want to transform as our action. I would say media type is equal to automation, and then what we want to do with the automation is trim, and here we could say I want to decrement by 2 dB or 1 dB, and we could just do project logical editors. We could also just say if you want it to be down by 25%, we could say multiply by 0.75. So now we could just drop down by, and we could do that for all automation tracks if you want. So two different approaches, either quick link with trim, and you could just move the faders down however much you want. All the automation, the existing automation will work. Or if you want to approach it via the logical editor, you could do that as well. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay, Clay21000 asks, hi, which is the best reverb for symphonic orchestra? I tried a lot, but did not find some that satisfied me. So I think that usually people tend to work with convolution reverbs for symphonic pieces. So, and our convolution reverb, and what a convolution reverb is, if you're not familiar with it, is going to be a reverb that is basically utilizing samples as the basis for the reverb. So instead of kind of synthesizing a particular room, so we can see that we have a number of these tracks kind of being sent to our reference. Set it to just set this here to reverence. Sorry about that. And then you could just kind of work with different concert halls here, and there's great concert halls throughout the whole world. So if you want to go to Austria, it's a good place to go for classical. So, I would definitely check out like the different formats here. There's lots of great concert halls, chapels, churches that are available inside of Reverence. All right, so we see Robbie just says, thank you, Greg, for answering all my questions. That's what we're here for. Okay, and Robbie has one more question, though. Sorry to bother, but how do you use the combined selection tools thing? It just seems complicated to me. All right, so let's take a look. And this is really so that you don't, we found that people would have to generally switch between two tools constantly for a lot of editing fluidity. And just to make it easier, we put it in kind of a combined mode. So I'll just show this here. Just hide this track real quick. And let me just turn off that one preference. Okay, so let's say we have like a big audio event here. So when we're in the combined mode, this will combine kind of the range tool as well as the object selection tool. So depending which area you're in, if you're in the upper zone, it's now functioning as a range tool. And when you're below in the lower zone, it operates as a selection tool. So if I wanted to come here and hold down, let's say I want to do real quick like a fade out, I could do this. But if I wanted to just select a range and delete it, I could do that just by going to the upper area here. Or if I want to take that particular range and duplicate it, I could hit Control or Command D to duplicate. If I want to now come over and say, while we're at the bottom, if I want to trim, I could trim, and I have my snap turned on to beat. So if we want to trim the start or end of the events or adjust the amplitude here, but if I wanted to just take that particular area and hit Control or Command plus Shift X, I could just do range editing tasks. So if you're familiar with what each of these tools do, and there's great stuff that you could do, like I want to take this, and if you go to edit to range, we could even choose to do stuff like crop and get rid of the areas that aren't there instead of having to constantly switch back and forth between two separate tools for these functions. That we could combine those functions right here so we don't always have to go back and forth between two tools. All right, I'm going to go ahead and paste the Zoom link. We'll be starting in about a little less than an hour. All right. So we see a question from 808 King. Greg, when using spectral layers as an extension, I'm trying to get the snare out of its stereo file with lots going on. After I separate the layers, I can't get the snare layer onto a track. Can you help me? All right, so let's come over to this. So generally, you might have to do like a two-step process. So let's take a look, see if we can. So I'm not sure if it's a full loop. If it's a full loop, let me just. All right, so I'm going to take this file here, and we will come over and we'll let up spectral layers. Okay, so as we go to our extension, we'll see spectral layers. right, and I want to we'll unmix song first. Okay. So let's say I just want drums to be unmixed. This will take just a minute or two. Then I'm going to take the drum file, drag it to the project window, and at that point I'm going to just extract. There we have the option of extracting cymbals, kick, and snare. We'll just let this do its magic here. All right, so we see from Andre, just says, that's it. The delete overlaps in the preferences somehow is checked. Man, that was driving me crazy. So yeah, that could do it. Okay, so we're about 55% there. If you're not familiar with what Spectral Layers is doing here, it's basically unmixing different elements within the song. Okay, so right now what we're doing is we're telling Spectral Layers to, and we're running this via ARA, and we're telling it basically to unmix the drums. We could do drums, bass, guitar, piano, other. I just did the drums for this example. Okay, so right now, if we listen to our Spectral Layers, we'll come over here.
Let me let you know what I'm up. Outside in the cold, I walk.
So now that I've done that, I could come over to the drums. I'm going to drag the drums out into its own project here. We're going to start them at the same time. And now what I want to do on this is we're going to choose to unmix the drums. Here, we'll stop the preview. Okay, so now I've done that. We'll make this a little larger. So
Let me let you know what I'm about. Cold,
so if we want to mute the snare,
let me tell you lies about me.
and now I could drag the snare and just have the snare as its own track right here.
Let me tell you lies.
So I have all my drums.
Don't you know you graduated last?
So try doing, extracting the drums first through the unmix, and then extract within the drums. You take the cymbals, snare, and kick, and extract those separately. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. I'm looking for a way to filter track selections by their routing. Here are two scenarios. I want to send all tracks into a new bus while still preserving the previous routing structure. I'm looking for a way to add an additional bus in between the existing tracks and the stereo out. All right, so let's come here. Go back to this project. Okay, so let's say I want to take all of my drums in this project and send them to a group and still maintain, when we look at the tracks, they're all going to the stereo output. So what I could do, I'm going to add a group track. And now what I could do is I'll activate Q-Link and use the send here and just send it to the group. Turn it on. If I hold down Command or Control, we could set it at the default level, or I'll just type in 0. So now as we do this, all my drums are now being routed. So we look at my drum channels, it's going to my stereo out, but they're also feeding my drum group. So this way the routing is preserved. All right, and part 2 of this is I want to drive the stereo out a bit more, but I can't simply just filter by audio instrument tracks and use those volume faders, as that will mess up the gain structure of the interposed buses. You know, so at this point, if you like had everything sent to a group, the output of this group is still being sent to the stereo output. So if you want to drive more, we could just increase the gain of the group. So let me know if that is helpful for part 2 of your question. But you know, everything is still going out of the stereo out, but we could drive it with other sources as well. All right, wonderful to see Nick on from Essex in the UK. Always wonderful to see Mark Rabin. Everyone say woof to Mark Rabin's dog Stella. And we'll see if someone gives Stella some, everyone pass on little dog treats to Stella, Mark Rabin's dog. All right, so we see Spa Dog says, no, they are off in my template. And I guess this is with the instrument tracks going to the, within the template that's triggering the real-time export. So let me know if they're disabled or if they're off, because that makes a big difference. So, you know, if they're just kind of turned off, it's still taking in effect for the delay compensation, but let me know, Spa Dogs, if they're disabled or just simply the plugin is turned off. All right, Jammin' and Cannon is checking in from Texas. Thanks for being here. Val is saying hi to everybody around the world. Thanks for joining us from Vienna, Austria. Great to see you on. All right, Robbie asks, also, Greg, can you share your OBS streaming sessions so we can steal that crisp video quality? So I don't do anything special at all. So I just go to my display capture, and I just have it capturing 1920 by 1080 just from my display. That's all it is just my display capture. So I probably had to give credit for the crisp zoom quality to OBS and YouTube for that, and also your internet connection. If you have a slower internet connection, you may see it at a lower quality, and you may have to click on the settings of the video playback to do that, but nothing special or secret on my end. Always great to see Jay from Secret Studios. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Gaming Octopus asks, thank you for clarifying. So the MIDI dragged over to the Quantize panel. When I did the same, it doesn't play or feel anything like the MIDI I recorded. Can you explain the Quantize panel? So it could depend, because when we have the Quantize panel here, there is a grid that is associated because, the element that you're going to be quantizing to, will be based on a grid, and it's moving the quantized elements based around the grid. So, just be aware that, if you did something that was completely free form, that you might have to do like a tempo detection of it, and then lock the tracks. So we'll show you real quick here. Just open up a project. All right, so, so let's say, this was freely recorded. So if I play this with a click, there's no correlation. So, depending on the MIDI part, you may have to come here and just do a tempo detection of the events. And at that point, when you're doing this, so, so depending on what the events are, so, it could be that the tempo is just too, fluctuating too much for it to really be preserved as like a groove quantize. So, so you might have to approach it from a tempo detection approach first with that. All right, Secret Studios, Jay asks, hi Greg, just got in. I'm new to automation and would really appreciate if you could cover the buttons in the panel at top. Besides the configuration button, I seem to be having issues. Okay, so let's just take a look at some of the automation functionality. All right, so let's say I just have my fader here. Let's open up the automation panel. Again, we can do that by hitting F6. All right, so there's our different automation modes that we could do here. So we have touch, auto latch, crossover. So let's say touch automation. Well, as we are writing automation, I'm going to just touch the fader. So I'm going to make sure that we enable automation by clicking on W. So now I move the fader. All right, so automation is being written. I release the fader. The automation stops writing. I move the fader. So as soon as I let go of the fader, the automation stops writing. When it's in auto latch, if I wanted to come here and I say I leave this value, I let go of the mouse, so I'm not touching the fader, it will write that value until it's actually stopped. So let's say I want to stop it at measure 21. Okay, so now at this point, let's say if I want to do a crossover, I could just say I have my value here, so I'm going to, so now as soon as I get up to where we were, it will, as soon as we have a threshold and we get up to that volume, it will stop writing the automation. as soon as if we want to do a quick dip, we could do that. Now trim, what trim automation is going to do, as we showed earlier, is if I like this overall automation curve, but I wanted it down or up a bit, I could put it into trim mode. And now as I just hold it down here, what it's going to do is we can see these two lines that are kind of superimposed on each other. So I just want these to be down and maybe a little down even more here. And now we can see these two lines. So this is the original value. When we trimmed the automation, it's decreasing it. So where we see is the result here in the orange is the values of the trim. And then we could choose to freeze the trim automation within the project, take it out of trim mode, and we could have kind of the reduction or the addition of the automation values. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. All right, so we see Jason Sykes just says, fantastic, thank you very much. All right, we have the illustrious Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas here finally. So glad you can make it, Michael. It's not the same if you're not here distributing virtual ice cream. All right, Bruno B asks, hello, Greg. How can I change the color note in piano roll editing? Thanks. Okay, so let me just... All right, so there are some different options. So let's say we just have some notes here. So the default option will colorize the notes based on velocity. So the higher the velocity, the redder those particular notes will be. And we can see kind of this color mode directly here. We could also choose to colorize by pitch. So different pitches can have their own colors. We could colorize based on the channel. So right now, I'll just make this a little larger. So if we have our channel, I'll hold down my Alt or Option key. Let's make it green. But now when we choose to colorize by channel, we could have it based upon it. So here we could have it. So each channel could have its own unique color. We could colorize it based on the part, or colorize it based on grid match. There's also where we could say sound slots if we're using different articulations for like an orchestral instrument. We could also do scale and chords. So if we have a chord track, we could have notes that are red or out of key, notes that are blue within the chord. And if it's a dark blue, it means that it's within the key but out of the chord. So you could have different coloring options directly here. So, but default is velocity. A lot of people may choose to use part color as well. And then so you could just come over here and switch to different coloring options. So some different choices for how you want it colored. Always wonderful to see Kai Wen Franklin on from Florida, if I remember correctly. All right, we see Uno Memento isn't able to join the Zoom meetup. He's on a road in Finland. Thanks for checking in. Hopefully you're not checking in while you're driving, but But thanks for being here, and we appreciate your loyalty to the live streams. So we see, hello Greg, what are your personal top features of Cubase 13? I really, at first I didn't appreciate kind of the new appearance of the mixer. But for me, and I have not the best eyesight in the world. I've had, different, eye surgeries and stuff. But to me, being able to see all the different contents in the mixer is much easier to me. At first, I was like, turn it down. It's too bright. But now I appreciate kind of the new features. I really like the Iconica sketch. Just a whole bunch of little things like, the start modes, things that save you like 100 to 200 mouse clicks in a session. So, do I want it to start from, from the project cursor, having anchor points. So as if I have an event selected over here, but my cursor is here, that if the event is selected and I zoom in, little things like that, really can speed up kind of editing workflows. But I think there's just hundreds of great new things, and I think it's great. I remember Hans Zimmer described it once, like these little details that, save you a lot of time. He's like, and one thing he said about Cubase is like, I really like that they sometimes go back into their sock drawer and kind of tidy it up when they didn't have to. The performance increases as well for the new processors, having all of the, all the channel settings directly here. The new Pultec style EQs are wonderful. The black valve compressor is just great. It's wonderful to have a vocoder back in, so we don't have to have a third party. So, and I'm sure I'm missing like 100 other fantastic, incredible features as well. But those are some that just kind of popped into my head. All right, so you see Kywin Franklin says, don't you have to have the full version of the tool to do that? So I guess this is with the Spectral Layers. So you need Spectral Layers Pro to do Spectral Layers 1 that comes with Cubase 12 or 11, 12, and 13 will allow you to extract the vocals. The Pro version will allow you to extract individual instruments and individual drums. All right, we see David M. from Liverpool has managed to make it today. All right, Kywin Franklin asks, Greg, another question about Groove Agent 5. I still need to use the USB key when I open it. Will this change at some point? So the Groove Agent 5 is migrated to the new Steinberg licensing for 6 or 7 months. So if you go to your My Steinberg account, you'll probably see a voucher, and that will migrate your e-licenser license from the Groove Agent e-licenser version to the Steinberg licensing. So, but yeah, you could do that already. All right, so you see Spa Dogs. It says the VSTs are off / disabled on the list of VSTs for the template. Are the tracks themselves disabled? So that's the more important thing, not the VSTs themselves, but the tracks that access those particular VSTs. All right, so we see from Kywin Franklin, it's just he has Spectral Layers 8 and Spectral Layers 10 on his desktop. I've never used them. Wondering if I already have the full app they installed when I installed Cubase. So you probably have Spectral Layers 1 version. So and Artist Knows Love says it's worth the price to update. All right, I know we had a bunch of questions sent in advance. I'm going to post the Zoom meetup, and if anyone wants to post it into the Discord, please feel free to as well. But let's jump over to some of the questions that were mailed in. All right, we had a question, how to snap the ends of events to the grid. All right, so let me just open up this project and let's revert this. All right, so let's look at this particular event here. So this event starts at measure 1, it ends somewhere between measures 6 and 7, maybe beat 3. So what we want to do is, if we have snap turned on to bar, that as I move this, we want not the beginning to be the snap point, but we want the end. So if I come here, it's going to snap the beginning. So anytime that we're in an audio event, you have something called the snap point. And we could manually move this, but what I'm going to do is I just made a macro to do this. So let's come over here, let's open up my macro, which we could see in the key commands. And it's called, I just called it snap point to end of the event. So I want not the beginning of the event, but the end of the event to snap. So I'm going to say transport locate selection end. So that's going to move the cursor to the end of this selection. So I'm going to have this event selected. And then we're going to say move that snap point, that little S, and we're going to move that to the cursor. So now that I run this macro, I could now have the end of that particular event snap, as opposed to, so we could now just have that snap point automatically go to the end. So we could actually, at this point, when we do this, when we see this, now the end of the event is snapping and not the beginning. So just again run this macro, snap point to end of event, transport locate to selection end, audio snap point to cursor, and then that will allow you to snap the end point. Okay, we had a question on the last live stream of, you didn't have the latest version of Groove Agent, but how to load up Percussion Agent in Groove Agent 5.2, the full version. So when we come over here, let's say I have the full version, so I'm just going to right click and we will load kit with patterns. And we will kind of, when we see all of our kits, we could just come directly over here, see our Percussion Agent. And as we open this up, I'll just play a particular pattern. So again, just kind of right click, and at that point you could load the kit with the patterns. We can have these kind of just loaded up right here, and that's how you could load up the Percussion Agent. Next question. Hi Greg, when working at 2048 buffer size, is it better to set volume automation precision to 1 or 8 samples to prevent issues? Higher values reduce performance? So I don't think there's going to be any consequences performance wise for that. And if you're not familiar, if we go to your studio menu to studio setup, I think this came in maybe version 12, that we could set the volume automation precision in earlier versions was set to 8 samples. and people wanted sample accurate automation, so now we could adjust it down to a single sample for the automation, but I don't think it's going to increase anything. I think they kept the older one for compatibility with other projects. All right, so we had a question about tempo detection. It says the area issue we're having, I thought, was because the project was imported from Elements 10 and I use Pro 12. When an individual event on an audio track is selected, we can tempo detect. When they are glued together, the tempo detect is grayed out. How do we get around this? Is this why we rendered in place? All right, so now what we've done here on this particular track, is we had 3 separate files, and probably what happened is so we have 3 separate audio events, and if we want to treat these different audio events collectively together, a lot of people will use the glue gun. So now that we glue multiple events, we can move one single entity like so. But when we want to do a tempo detection, we do tempo detection on events but not parts. So we go to your project menu, we see that tempo detection is grayed out. So to transform from a part to the multiple events, go to your audio menu, and now we could choose dissolve part. Then we could see the tempo detection from the project menu is available for each individual part. So it's just that you're treating it collectively as one single entity, multiple entities, and the tempo detection needs to be derived from each individual part. All right, hi Greg Fong from the Club Cubase from February 23rd. I have Groove Agent 5 activated, but it doesn't show in the plugin menu, Media Bay. What can I do to get it to show so I could choose kits, etc.? So I think if you go to Media Bay, and this probably wouldn't be the best, and you come over here, you may, if you look under plugin name, you may see, so let's take a look. So here I could just see my Groove Agent, and now I could see all of my different kits that are available here. So I just chose in one of the fields here to have plugin name. So you might have it set, it may show up as Groove Agent SE. All those kits will work. So now if I just double click, I could open up an instance of Groove Agent for that. So we just open that up. Another method to do this, which might be even quicker, is if we go to the right zone. Let's go to Media. We can see the full Groove Agent. Double click. I can see all of my available kits here. So if I wanted to run like the optional Simon Phillips vintage drums, I can now just come right over here, open that up, and that could load up that kit with its presets. So 2 different ways of doing that, but just, make sure that when you kind of have this done, that, so again, if you're in a full media bay, you can see the plugin name. I just see Groove Agent kind of pop up here with all of my other VST instruments. When I have VST sound selected, when I want, so I could load up kits that way, or if I'm doing it from the right zone media bay, it's just a matter of, we'll go home, we'll select VST instruments, your full Groove Agent or Groove Agent SE, double click on the family of kits, and then you could just double click to load up that particular preset. And thanks for sharing photos and screenshots for you. All right, so we have a question. Maybe I missed it, but is it possible now that an effect plugin inserts window can follow track selection? If yes, how? So it doesn't work kind of automatically when a track is selected, but what you can do is if you hold down Alt Option plus Shift and click on the edit window for the track. So let's say if I have plugins here, so if I have a number of plugins here, I could just say, Alt Option and then click on the edit channel settings. But when I go to another track, I may have to kind of do that same function. So it doesn't automatically open up all of the plugin windows. You'd have to instantiate it. I think it could be annoying to, every time you select a track to have plugins pop up. So I think it's, being kind of instantiated by the user makes sense for that. Okay, I think we covered those next two questions. All right, we got that question as well. All right, so we had a question mailed in. Could you explain, this was, or not mailed in, but on the comments of the last live stream, can you explain how to export Dolby Atmos /5.1, etc., so that we can listen and test on a conventional AVR home theater? Thank you very much. So generally, when we export a 5.1 setup, those files aren't really going to be compatible for like a home receiver. And same with Dolby Atmos, they're generally not capable of doing it. I think if you wanted to listen, so when we export an ADM file from Dolby Atmos, you would need to, basically, that would export the ADM file, but the stereo receiver doesn't do that. It won't accept a raw ADM file. So I think if you have the Dolby, you would need to get the Dolby renderer plugin, and then they have a function within, I think it's only within the Dolby renderer plugin, that allows you to create an MP4 file for quality control. If you wanted to listen to your 5.1 setup on your home theater, if you have a receiver that has 5.1 inputs, you could do it directly from 6 outputs from your audio interface. If you wanted to do it digitally via Dolby AC3, Dolby Digital AC3, or a DTS file, you would need to have that encoded. And some of those encoders could be expensive, which is probably why the format never really took off. But you could basically have a stereo file. We used to sell encoders. They were expensive. They were about $1,000, and that just covered the licensing cost. And that would allow you to export like a stereo wave file that was encoded in DTS that could then play back, or you could do it in Dolby Digital that could then play back. But there's some other tools, that third-party tools, that you could basically take your 5.1 and export it and have in a encoded waveform. But those solutions aren't available in Cubase, and they can be expensive, and that is kind of a prohibitive thing of those different formats. All right, let's jump back to our live questions again. Thanks for, and again, if you want to mail questions in, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'm going to post the Zoom social link. And if you haven't been on, they're always a lot of fun, great discussions, great to see everyone. All right. All right, so we see from Ruben G3M says, hello, this is Cubase 13, isn't it? So yeah, it may have a project that may show like Cubase 12 or earlier versions, but everything we're doing is in the latest version that's available. All right, so we see, hey Greg, what are the changes to Groove Agent 5.2? I'd asked about Groove Agent 5.2 on Friday. I'm not able to see my percussion agent. So I think that, it was kind of dealing more with the media bay options. But, as we showed, if you just wanted to come over, just try right clicking. So let's say if I cut the kit, and as we just showed a couple minutes ago, that you should be able to, let's say we load, you could right click and say load kit with patterns. We will jump back. So if we see, we could double click on all. If you scroll down, you should see the percussion agent that's right there as well. So let me know if yours is working differently, but that's how mine is working with 5.2. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios. That's super helpful. I really appreciate it, Greg. So you're welcome. All right, so Kai Wen Franklin says, I'm confused. I can only unmix vocals in my version of Cubase with spectral layers. It says spectral layers 1 in Cubase. Am I missing something? So there's Spectral Layers Pro, which is an update from Spectral Layers 1, and so you would need to get the Pro version. The version that comes with Cubase is only going to be doing the vocal extraction. All right, great to see Tiago on from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. So we have Braxel from Texas. All right, so we see Mark just says, hey everyone, Nick mixed/mastered a few of my songs in the upcoming release. The highest thanks and praise to Nick. He does amazing work. So that's great. Thanks for giving Nick the kudos. All right, so we see Sven asks, when will we get an LFO tool to automate all sorts of parameters just like the Ableton people can? So you can do it already. So, I mean, it can be a workaround. I realize, I know that Steinberg is aware of this, but let's see. And you'll probably need to get like a loop back for MIDI. But what you could basically do, let's say if I want to have so, what we could do is just kind of have as a MIDI insert, we could just come right over here and have so we'll say MIDI insert. Let's say I want to take this track, this glitch drums, and I have a filter that I want. So we look at our inserts, we have a dual filter here. So what I want to do is set up just on this track. I'm going to create an empty MIDI track. I know that this is kind of a workaround, but once you figure out how to do it, and we're going to activate the Auto LFO plugin. We could go into the generic remote. And again, we would need to send this out via our MIDI loopback. A lot of parameters, you don't have to do this, but if it's not MIDI mappable, when we go to our generic remote, I'll just say so I'm going to say, we're going to say this is coming in from our IAC driver. And what we want to do is, this is basically generating our MIDI CC of 10. So I'm going to click on Learn. And we want to go to Mixer. Let's go to Glitch. We'll go to our Glitch Drums track. We'll go to our Insert. And let's just choose Position. So now this particular plugin is now just doing the auto LFO from right here. So I know it's not as convenient as other solutions, but you can do LFOs for plugins that don't have MIDI learn capability. So you need to send a MIDI track out, send that into the generic MIDI remote, and after doing that, you can send it, you know, if the plugin parameter responds, you could just do it directly to this on a MIDI track to the synth parameter. But I know that Steinberg is aware of it, and hopefully in the future we'll see forthcoming solutions. All right, we have Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. Thanks for joining us again. All right, so we see Danielle Tocan says no one needs Dante. We do prefer this solution. So I think there's a lot of people that require Dante for facilities and live sound stuff. All right, great to see Michael Marshall from the Somerset, UK. Glad you can make it today. All right, Sven asks, when I run large or huge sessions with lots of MIDI data, I get dropouts on individual tracks. Certain notes don't play. Is this due to the library or the DAW's fault? Any hidden settings? So one thing is always, you know, if you go to your studio setup here, we could say, go to the audio system. You want to make sure that you have multi-processing on, that you're using ASIO Guard. And when you go to the audio interface, raise the buffer as high as you could go. So, you know, once you have it for mixing, the buffer size isn't as critical as it is for recording. Also within particular instruments, you know, raise that particular instruments. If you are running, you know, let's say an instance of Hallian or Hallian Sonic, you know, or other similar instruments where you have multiple instruments, realize that if you load up one instrument with, like, you know, multiple sounds, that this one instrument in most programs, in most playback engines, will only utilize one processor. So you might be able, you know, so depending on the instrument, and if we get a Hallian, we could actually see that we take advantage of multi-core. Not a lot of playback instruments do. So with that, you might be, if you have like 8 instruments loaded into one instrument, if it doesn't take advantage of multi-core, you might want, or you'd probably get better performance and split it across multiple cores better by just putting one sound per instrument. So those are some things that you could do. Also on the instrument, you know, there's probably going to be a setting for how much is being streamed from memory, how much is preloaded in memory versus streamed from disk. You could adjust that as well. So those are some things you could do in Cubase and within your particular instruments as well. All right, we'll be going over in about 5 minutes. To our Zoom social. All right, so we see Mark Val Q asks, how to assign a CPU core to a certain plugin. So you don't really do it. It's kind of, that's done at the operating system level. So there isn't like a user way of saying, use core 13 for this particular plugin. So. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions that are sneaking in. If not, we can start migrating over to the Zoom. So once again, we'll be back on Friday doing our normal 4-hour live stream. And if you need to mail questions in advance, you can send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And we'll wait, see if there's any other questions that kind of pop in. If not, we will go ahead and just migrate over to the Zoom social. And if you haven't done a Zoom social meetup, you can just, it's a wonderful way to kind of put a face to all the names you may see on the live streams here. Let me go ahead and all right, so we see Jay asks, Greg, I'd like to be able to hide all tracks which don't either have entries in Notepad or are groups and effects are tied tracks with Notepad entries to-do list. How might I do this on Project Logical Editor? So the Notepad isn't a criteria for selection in the Project Logical Editor. So I don't think that there's a way to do it by by Notepad data or not. So that isn't one of the main criteria that's available to access from the Project Logical Editor. All right, so we see Michael Pierce. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start the Zoom meeting here. And here's login credentials, so meeting ID, and this is live as of February 27th at 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So if you're watching this afterwards, it may not make sense, but here's the meeting ID is 810-666-232177 and the passcode of 005026. I'll go ahead and start. All right, so we see Spa Dogs is on. All right, we have Jay. All right. We'll just we'll keep the live stream going for another couple minutes. All right, we have Daniela. All right. All right, we'll see if people are, I'll hang on the live stream, see if people, it seems like people are getting on okay. And I'll post the Zoom link one more time. All right, so we see Benny joining us. All right, we have Jan. All right. We'll give it a couple of minutes. right, so we have Soren joining. Terry Gray. Give it another couple minutes here. Then we'll migrate fully over. All right, we have Thomas Van Dyke joining. All right, we'll wait another couple minutes, get people migrated over. Just looking at comments, see if there's anyone had a problem getting on with the link. Looks like it's been okay. All right, let's give it one more minute and then we'll fully transition over. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and shut down the live stream. And hope to see some more people join over. All right, so let me just